try and answer
Someone
that.
else.
But
Yes.
because they don't get paid, they're all out doing their side hustles and not actually running the institutions that they're employed to run. So, you know, to your point, we must create that environment and systems, processes, programs that support small businesses so that our economy can have more activity. And that's what the Minister of Finance needs. You know, unfortunately, he's just having to tax and retax and tax those who are already taxed. But really, we do need more people to pay taxes, and that means small businesses must become formal, etc.
Yes, my name is Kweku Kalmuni. I'm very happy to be here, and I think this is part of the solution. Having CEOs. I'm trying to avoid standing. No, I'm trying to avoid standing. I think having this forum is very important. I just came from a Constitution lectures, and I think some of us were there, and maybe later on we'll share some of the solutions, but having the CEOs here, and one of the conclusion is we have to be the solution. Sorry, not government. Government is not the solution. Private business is always much more efficient. And we always talk about small scale, small scale, small scale. Small scale haven't done anything for our farmers in Ghana. We need big scale. Okay, this salt pond hasn't done, except for him. Now he can do industry. So we shouldn't think small, we should think big. When you talk about the apateshi, I didn't clap for you. I don't drink apateshi, but I eat a lot of chocolate. I'm a chocolate man. And anytime I go from Ghana, I travel Ghana, I bring about 100 to 200 chocolate, and I share them. So this is what I recommend. And anytime I come to a forum, I need to drink cocoa chocolate. So I always give my people anytime, and when I have a seminar, 3 choices. You can have cocoa, you can have cocoa, and you can have cocoa. Thank you very much.
But is there anyone in the room? Do we have anyone in the room who is into cocoa production or cocoa processing? I mean, someone who can speak with more experience. She's into cocoa? No? But you know something about cocoa? No, I'm just trying to use one illustrative example. When I read this $138 billion thing and how the average Ghanaian cocoa farmer has been intergenerationally poor, they are just feeding European and American wealth and other regional wealth. I mean, can we go beyond the complaints? And I like where you took it from. That is not us, it's not government, it's us. But how is it that complicated? And I'm a bit ignorant about this, so I don't know what the problem is. Is it that complicated to have cocoa processing company that will make chocolates as sweet as the ones you get at duty-free in various airports in the world? I'm not sure. I don't know what it is. What is the reason why we don't have that transition? Which is why cocoa, for example, is a major example, but somehow we're not able to. I mean, and we are in times, as Estelle mentioned, where we need to have the generation of wealth here. Until we have the generation of wealth here, we'll have to depend on external financing. It's as simple as that. And the external financing will come, but somehow the repayment is a problem because our currency is also depreciated. It's a complicated thing.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alhaji Abdulaziz. I'm into transport. Logistics, and then a bit of cocoa. So we buy cocoa, we trade cocoa. We've been doing this for the past almost 30 years. We have been confined to an aspect of the business for some reasons. One is barriers to entry. We're talking about cocoa processing. Cocoa processing has 2 or 3 major barriers. The first major barrier is cost of capital. The amount of investment required to set up a factory. The second barrier is off-takers. You have all sort of businesses out there who need cocoa, who buy cocoa, but it's easy for them to get the cocoa beans from cocoa board done. For instance, the local processor, if there is any in the country, to get the cocoa and process for such people to take from you. So the policy should have been probably that to encourage people to process, whether they are local or foreigners, to set up, establish processing factories within Ghana so that the primary should have been to export processed cocoa. It doesn't have to be chocolate. And this is not only, when I didn't want to speak because it doesn't really border on cocoa alone. It's on all the minerals. This $130 billion you were mentioning, we all know it. For a fact, we all know that Cote d'Ivoire is the largest producer of cocoa in the world. They produce about 2.5 to 3 million tons of cocoa a year. Ghana is second to Cote d'Ivoire, producing between 800 to 1 million tons a year. We hit 1 million, I think, once in our history. The problem has always been that generic, where it's easy for to extract and export. It goes for minerals like, I don't know, gold, like iron, like bauxite. We don't process anything. It has nothing to do with cocoa. When you take anything, take aluminum, bauxite. The value of aluminum compared to, go and buy simple aluminum film in a supermarket. Look at the value of that compared to the value of the bauxite that you extract. Back to cocoa, the value of the industry is 130 billion. Cote d'Ivoire, 2.5 to $3 million, 3 million tons of cocoa earns them around $10 billion. We have cocoa with premium because our cocoa is said to be of a higher quality. Our cocoa will fetch us about $4 billion a year. The two countries can never come together to even agree on one policy. Back in the 60s, I heard the two countries wanted to play, or how do you call it? They wanted to come together, team up, so that at least they can control the price, cocoa price. There was an arrangement where cocoa was not supposed to be exported beyond a certain limit, so that they keep the cocoa, and if at all, if they can't get the best price, they should burn it. That policy never got implemented properly. They never burnt any cocoa. Cote d'Ivoire never burnt any cocoa. And they didn't have to burn cocoa. Why should we burn food? Why should we produce food and burn? The first problem about cocoa is that cocoa tree, or as how do you call it, just like any tree, once you plant it, its destiny is to yield fruit. So it will yield the fruit. Once the fruit comes out, you need to prepare it and keep it. If we were able to process or to conserve the beans, probably we would have been able to command better price for our beans. Why will you grow cocoa beans? Your first instinct is to sell it. Your first instinct is for it to go. We have gone even beyond selling. Now we are forward selling. We are selling what the tree hasn't produced. I really don't want to go on and on. Let me leave it there.
I was actually going to ask you that I'm not taking it away. I was going to ask you that I'm a bit, forgive me for saying tired, but I'm a bit tired and also frustrated for hearing problems these days. Because we are not short of it. Neither are we also short of analysts. You are an excellent one, so I'm happy to hear your rendition of it. But solutions. So the question I was asking is it impossible? Because the cocoa one for me is always fascinating. And I tell you what, I have always known this, but I saw it confirmed only yesterday on CNN. The CNN was out there basically saying last year the cocoa industry, 138 billion. And the cocoa farmers around Ghana don't look anything rich, even middle class, middle class. So what is the solution? I mean, is it impossible to have...
Let me give you one simple example. I mentioned, for instance, that once the cocoa tree produces the cocoa,
Yes.
what you're looking at, first of all, is value. It's not just to process for processing sake. Take a country like Holland. They barely produce anything in terms of industrial machineries or this and that, but they are developed because they trade. Your focus, mostly, our biggest problem is the leaders, political leaders, I can say. Because first of all, we lose focus, we lack the ability to focus on an idea, implement it, and achieve it. To give you an example, or to go back on the cocoa issue, if you have cocoa, or for that matter, any produce, your first bargaining power is your ability to handle whatever you produce. Whatever your product is, if you produce cocoa and you can't store cocoa, you can't manage cocoa, you can't handle cocoa, then you are at a loss. Because your first, like this oil, when you extract oil, and you don't have a place to keep it, what will you do? You either pour it out or sell it at the
No. When you go elsewhere, the private sector through the their chamber.
Be able to present policies in a way that benefits business leaders. More recently, me and a group of friends, we came across the same issue, and we started an organization called 100K for Ghana, which is a fund, and primarily we're focused on building and manufacturing items in Ghana. So one of the things we have is kente weaving factory in the Volta region and mushroom farming in the eastern region. And going across the eastern region and speaking to a lot of business leaders there, hotel managers and a lot of people that buy and sell mushrooms, they confirm that they import a lot of their mushrooms. And this is back to the same problem that we're discussing, you know. But they were very much adamant to receiving some mushrooms manufactured and grown in Ghana, and they were open-minded to it, but they did make clear their issues with government as well. But I do think, you know, forums like this, similar to outside world, where you come across with a forum with business leaders, you're able to then go to the government and lobby them for policies in your favor, in business's favor, because it's not every day that the government is going to look out for private sector.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going back to the cocoa discussion because, like Alaji said, I've also been associated with it for a decade or two on the finance side. And I think Alaji did make some very important interventions to the extent that he said cocoa, even though you are insisting on using cocoa as the discussion point, it is just one of the many things that happens in this country where we don't get much value because we are not doing value add. So there's 140 billion industry, and we are getting 4 billion, if you are lucky, usually 3.5 billion. So the question is, how do we get the rest of it? Now, we have modeled our industry in that way as a primary producer. All we wanted to do was to produce and then hand it over to those who wanted to do other things with it. And now we discover that that is not where the money is. So what do we do? The tariffs, actually, the tariff regime that we play in the world goes against us. Even the amount of cocoa, non-produced, non-value added that you can go out of Ghana with is actually regulated. We can't just get up and start sending processed cocoa liquid into Europe. We actually have a cap, and that's why sometimes even when they come here, they have to be careful how much volume there are. Now, I'd like you to speak about the fact that we are forward selling and so on and so forth. We are forward selling also because we don't even have the finance for it. We've been going forever, and we need pre-financing and all of that to be even to buy. And it's a tragedy that 25 years of a syndicated loan for Cocoa Board, we still have a situation where we must actually go. In fact, they had a shock of their lives where last year the pricing changed significantly because of country risk, because Cocoa Board was actually being priced much better than the country Ghana. It was the only facility where Ghanaians could access the European market at a rate almost like a first world country, as opposed to all other things that we did. But we have managed to drag cocoa almost into the rest of it. Cocoa was doing well because it was very well structured. In fact, my worry about cocoa is more the future than the current. We speak about the current where we are not adding value. I speak about the future where we have no production. Because people are abandoning it, as we all know, and going into all other things like galamsey and so on and so forth. Now, there was a huge program to even support cocoa with some fertilizer and so on and so forth. What happened? People smuggled and sent it to other countries. So the question is, at what point is it government? At what point is it our own selves? At what point is it private sector and so on? There are many issues that are going. Once government moves, other people move to try and do the very. So again, I guess all of it comes down to leadership. And the question is, who is leading? Who must lead to ensure that when we say we are going this way, we go without all the things that come through?
So, because you spoke about market access, and that's the problem. The Europeans will use market access, and other markets will use market access to block
Absolutely.
But now we're going to have a market access of 1.2 billion, conservatively, let's say 100 billion plus would be ones who can afford all kinds of things. How can we tap that market?
So now you're talking about the first problem we have with the cocoa you spoke about. We are not even consumers. So we produce 1 million metric tons and consume what, 50,000? So the first control you don't have, like Alaji said, where do we take it to? To the Europeans or to other African markets? Ditto, other things. Gold. Again, gold, we're number one. I think we've come back to number two. Maybe 5% of world production. And then do what with it? We don't even use it. Most consumption is in India. So we are talking after. After is supposed to help us to now to make sure at least we are producing and consuming amongst ourselves. The question is 1 year after, where, how many have done? There's just been one test of it. Nothing is happening. The governments are still there. Who is driving it? Ask, after has been launched 1 year, so after so much discussion and all the promises it's supposedly had, how many people have utilized after? I've heard one in 1 year. So those are the things we need to go, create the markets. The markets must be robust enough. And then he speaks about finance and backward integration, forward integration with infrastructure and all of that, and producing and all of that. When if all is said and done and the tariffs are against you or the markets, you can assess the markets. You are deliberately prevented from assessing the market. Because you can't even, thankfully somebody says he eats cocoa twice a day, probably gives us 1% more of the market. But those are the things we need to do with our primary production. Make sure we control the market as well. Therefore, make sure the collaborations we are starting with the likes of Ivory Coast and so on are allowed to carry on. Trust me, it will be frustrated. The EU will frustrate it. It will frustrate like it's nobody's business. So if you don't have stamina, just know that you will abandon it at some point. We must have a framework which says we are going to do this for 20 years. We are going to do this for 40 years. We don't care whether we'll be frustrated. But if we start worrying in 1 year, because in 1 year,
the private sector is not being consulted. And yes.
We'll just pick one. Product. And I can see the frustration. Starting from Aziz. We're already frustrated. But I want to take it from another angle. Can I say that nobody
complain. I've also
actively. They've just gotten one leather ball somewhere, just gotten one old jersey that Pele wore, and they were charging $15 per head at the time. I'm imagining how much they're charging at this time. What are we talking about? We're just saying that we need to own the space, own what is originally ours. Recently, I visited the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel, and I realized that somebody had done you know, a miniature element of like a space in Egypt where they had used limestone and a few others to construct an ambience that you can find only in Egypt. And the inscription is very bold there. They say, no photography. Okay? So there is an element of ownership. How much are we owning what we're producing? How much are we owning what we're producing so that we can milk the benefits that are there? And I believe that as we go along, we're going to wire our path in focusing on. Would like to, at this point, welcome some more suggestions from the ground. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Kojo Choi. I think when Esther was making submission that we must, try consuming that is of made in Ghana, and she looked at me as though I am part of the problem, or I made a problem coming from China. Well, I'm very much, grounded here. And perhaps we should have voted Dan Latte maybe some 10 years ago. Okay, he was shouting for domestication, domestication after domestication. And all of you are businessmen. And how do we make money? You increase revenue, you increase efficiency, at the same time you reduce cost. It's as simple as that. So Ghana being a country in that picture, I believe you being the CEOs of businesses as I am, we can solve problems in increasing the revenue whilst reducing the cost. But I felt I can add one more value that perhaps none of us in this room can add value, and that is why I've decided to speak. As I come from Korea originally, even though I'm a citizen of Ghana. Korea experienced IMF in the late 90s. The problem of Korea is not from the leakages, it's not from the saving cost. Korea experienced problem because it expanded so quickly and they couldn't hedge their investments and their risks properly. So when the time came for the exchange to be paid, they didn't have enough to pay. Do you know what happened to Korea and the majority Koreans? They came together. They were very sacrificial to a point where they brought their earrings, gold necklaces, gold rings. How sacrificial are we? Let's be honest with ourselves. Those who are going to suffer, and many of us, and many of you, you're all sorted out already. So, I want to bring the value within ourselves. Do you really care about Ghana? Or do you really care about your nuclear family and your children's education and your well-being? Let us be honest ourselves. Because I come from Korea, and I've lived here over 30 years. And I think I'm more Ghanaian than Korea now. And I know how we are. I know how we are. We have a problem. It's not a big problem, really. You're talking about government, private sector. You know how Korea became Korea? Korea had a leader like Kwame Nkrumah in the 60s. His name was President Park. And what he did, he called few individuals who are very industrious, who have no knowledge about shipbuilding, told them, I'm going to support you. I want you to go into shipbuilding industries. I want you to go into car manufacturing. Trust me, building an economy and industry really, of course there should be that dialogues between the government and the private sector. I believe that it has to happen, it has to continuously happen in Ghana. But I think beyond that we have a problem as people of Ghana. I don't think we are not, let us be proud of ourselves. Look, I'm an orange man here, coming from Korea, being a Ghanaian at the moment, shouting and crying that we have a bigger and deeper problem, that we have to become more sacrificial. Increase revenue, we will. Reduce cost, we will. How? We have to be accountable. We have to be accountable. For me, it's as simple as that.
Mr. Amardeep Singh Harry. Sure. Where's the mic? Sure.
My name is Amardeep Hari, Executive Chairman of IPMC Group. I think after listening to most of my friends, one of our biggest concern, and of course, when any house or family has problem, all the members should sit together and put up their minds together and discuss together how to come out of it. That's what we've been saying, that how government and private sector should relate to each other. But it's a problem we are pointing out, and what's the solution? How can we really relate to each other? But before discussing these national problems, I have a bigger concern, which is my relationship with my wife. And that has been up and down so many times. But one thing which I have learned from her, that if I need peace in the family, I should allow her to do all the micromanagement, the little things in the house, what will be for dinner, which school the kids should go to, which clothes everybody should wear, including mine. All these little things she needs to manage, and I should worry more about why the Ukraine and the Russia war is happening, what's happening in the US, where is Ghana going. I should just think about those bigger things. But end of the day, yes, we have to get together and discuss. So I see that I have been given a bigger responsibility. Of course, I end up doing nothing except thinking about them and everything she is doing. This is what a country is run, the government is the father, is the husband. It does all the policy work, it does all the thinking, it strategizes. But at the end of the day, it has to come back home, sit with his wife, which is the private sector, and talk together. This is what I have been thinking about. Sweetheart, what do you say? And private sector is the sweetheart of any economy. This is what is missing, even in these bad times and the good times. We have some so-called organizations which you were mentioning, that where we can put our case together and send it to the government. But it is not our responsibility. It is the responsibility of the father of the house to come down to the family and sit down with those various verticals. It could be cocoa, it could be transport, it could be IT, it could be anything. How can I help you? What policy, what strategy you need? Today we are in those bad times. Any business which comes down is more due to the internal factors, the mismanagement of the managers of that business, rather than the external factors, which of course also cause that business to come down, but it is more the internal factors. It's very similar to if there is a lot of heat outside the house, we will make sure inside our air conditioning is good. If it's raining and flooding, we will make sure we go and fix all the small patches so the water doesn't come inside. That internal management has to be better. It is our responsibility. Things can be happening in Ukraine and wherever, but the effect of that flood or rain or that storm, we need to make sure that we, the internal managers of this house, we plug in all the leakages and ensure that those external factors do not affect us. If you would see, comparing to all the West African countries, and I was just there in Abuja recently, and anybody I met, you're from IPMC, my children go to study at your place. Somebody else's children are studying at RCC University or other colleges. I mean, the best destination of education for people in Abuja and many other Nigerians is Ghana.
always one simple viewpoint. Start from diagnosis, symptoms, investigations, solutions. In the last few minutes, I've struggled to follow the conversation. Why? Because the issues are almost all over the place. We have got a lot of symptoms and then we're asking for solutions. If we don't find out exactly what the diagnosis is, it will be very hard for us to even offer any solutions to anything. I'm very sure that if we were to look at all the industries, I'm sure.
So I invite everyone to our office on Tuesday, just so that we can take the solution into our various departments in our own ways. But if we don't meet again, how would it happen? So the first and foremost is, are we meeting again? We are the grassroots, and you see, you're trying to solve your problem on your own. Meanwhile, you have a lot of brothers and sisters in different industries and different sectors within the industries. You could link up, consolidate, and push each other. Some of us right now are business people with ambitions, and they are almost at the top. But guess what? At this very moment, they need a place to sleep. They're just almost at the top. For Ghana, big projects. So are we all struggling in isolation, or are we coming together? Number two, I think we need to set bigger target for ourselves also. The government, yes, we've spoken a lot about what and what not the government has done and what the government is doing and what the government will do. I think we should let the government aside for some time, because number one, Ghana is really big, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of space for you to do whatever you want legally. But I think our ambitions and targets, they need to be bigger. We need to set bigger targets for ourselves. Ghana is very and potentially powerful. We just need to believe in Ghana. One of the ways is, let's think in creating our own economies. Let's leave this economy which is ailing with the bonds and all that. We can set it aside. By the way, you and I, as the business community, we can print our own money legally. but little do we know about it and how it is our right and how we can get it. Yes. We just need a little awareness. I think all of us are suffering from some level of ignorance, isn't it? But the opportunity is there. Ghana is big. Let's just get together, bond more. My office is open on Tuesday, and I mean it, just so that we can show some level of commitment. Thank you. And thank you very much, Mr. Host. This is amazing. Thank you.
You are normally all over the place when the problems are many. So just a bit more directional. Inflation has been one of the major problems this year. So, and the other problem is the instability of the dollar, or rather the instability of the city. And I think many business people you speak to will tell you that they are no more able to plan because, you know, things are on a rolling basis. How have we also contributed? I say we are pretending I'm one of you, but how, right. How has business, how has industry, private sector contributed to the dollar problem? In other words, how can we help de-dollarize this country? And I guarantee you, even when you price in cedis, you're calculating in dollars. So in your head, it is dollars, but outwardly cedis. In other words, you are using the dollar equivalent and then you're mentioning it. We have a psychological problem with the dollar. So how do we, as business people, and I have been in countries where the dollar means nothing. In fact, they will not even accept you when you have the dollar alternative. They don't even want to talk about it. The dollar means nothing. Their local currency is everything. And if you don't have the local currency, you have to go change your dollar. And they don't give it that level of almost insatiable value. So how do we get to that point? How has business contributed to it? Because I think some entities, even in this room, have contributed to that. There are hotels that still price in dollars, even to local. So maybe that's
all right. Captain Kofi Amabwing was about to make a point, and I think you've struck it right there. I mean, when you go to South Africa, for instance, it's almost impossible to go to someone and say, look, I want a few rand, I have dollars. Okay, Mr. Mabi.
Thank you very much. I wasn't going to talk because I'm the former CEO and founder of YouTube, and they will say, anything I will say, they will say, the man is trying to fight back or something. But I was touched with what Joy said and what Amar said and what a few of you have said. I think we can meet as many times as we want, and our situation is not going to change. The problem, not only with Ghana, but the whole of Africa, and it's with us, the black people. And I've sat down to reflect on this for the longest. The problem we have, and I want you to reflect on it and see what your views are, is that because God put us in the best part of the world, which there was abundance, that is why we are the way we are. We didn't have to think about snow. We didn't have to think about volcanoes, tornadoes, earthquake, none. So instead, we developed cultures and behaviors that were dictated by the environment. And in this world, the environment shapes everything. That is just background. Now, to the point where we're discussing, all that we're saying, if it would take seed, it comes from the leadership. If the leader loves his people, the leader should come inviting policies, inviting suggestions for us to do things and how we can go forward. But the leader is a typical African who doesn't respect other people, doesn't care about other people, because he's always lived in abundance. And so they get there, and Africans typically, we think about our immediate family, if we are lucky, our tribe, if we are lucky, our town. We don't think generally. Why? Because we are self-contained. We've always been self-contained since creation. So we don't respect other people. We always think about ourselves. think about that, because if we don't get it right and identify who we are, then we cannot find solutions to change our course. Now, on the issue that was raised about the dollar, since that was raised, I have to address that. When I was a kid, nobody ate rice. You eat rice when a guest visitor comes to the house or Christmas time. Forget about takeaways and burgers and all those and sausages. None. In every village in Accra, Accra, they will eat kinky. Central region, Eastern region, Ashanti region, Brown Half region, name it. Every house, every evening, they were pounding fufu, which was local, banchi and plantain. Now, because the Westerners wanted to expand their market, and because we are gullible, everybody wants to eat rice. And everybody wants to have oil. The oil we used to have was coconut oil, groundnut oil, palm nut oil, even that one you have on top of the soup. That's where you get your palm nut oil. It was okay for the house. Because they do no work, they pay, we all know their pay, and they own so many things. And this is corruption, is driving the exchange rate. So we need bold decisions on these things. Otherwise, this country, like most African countries, will never go anywhere. And therefore, we as business people, we have to find a way of getting the government to sit up. But it's difficult. The government is the leader. I remember when the city was falling sometime, NDC time, the governor called all the banks, MDs, and said, listen, it's very simple. We are importing rice so many billions of dollars. If we can just cut importation of rice, we won't have this problem. And the banks were asked to set up a fund of 200 million cedis at the time, which will be used to support some agric company to produce rice. And I got up immediately to talk, to support, and say it makes a lot of sense. That was the end of the story. We're not ready to make small sacrifices to save our country. But it's not because we don't want to make it, it's because we are not used to making it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Captain Prince Kofi Amwabing. And of course, the former president of the AGI is also here. He would want to make some contributions. Thank you.
Yeah, Kofi, I mean, you raised some issues, and I think some of the answers lie in what we've experienced in the past 3-4 weeks in our economy. And you will realize that nobody knew what happened beginning of December. The city started gaining so much strength. And for that matter, I got to a point, and not too long ago, about 2-3 weeks ago, I wanted to buy ticket, and at the travel agent, I wanted to give dollars. He said no. I mean, seriously, I wanted to use, okay, fine, I can use a foreign card. He said no, you must pay me in cedis. Because at that rate, you could see, I mean, you could see the extent to which the cedi was gaining strength. Now, how did these things come about? Probably some of the pronouncements of those in government, like some monetary policy directives that government is not going to support or the bank is not going to support some non-essential imports. Just that. Not that we don't know for a fact whether they have indeed stopped supporting some of the non-essential imports. But at least those pronouncements, those efforts that were being done, you know, you could see that at least there was some sort of response in the economy. Now the question is, now as we saw these sort of significant gains, how are we going to sustain it? What are we doing? One, as managers of the economy. Two, private sector. You know, and what I normally say is that in most cases, we as private sector players, what we do is that we always wait for government to call us. The business associations, when government is in trouble, about 2 months ago, the Jubilee House was calling almost every business and groupings. And that is what, after that, we don't take issues to government. Of course, sometimes, my good friend, Amma, sometimes we do and then we get tired and we stop. But if at this point in time, when we know that we all have stake in the economy, and for that matter, we need to ensure that we support government, you know, to bring us from this doldrum, we don't need to stop. We don't need to wait until, either ministry or Jubilee House call for meetings. What is it that, what are our plans, you see, as business owners? What do we want to see? What do we want government to do aside IMF negotiations? Now, secondly, there are some demands we must make of government. And there was one thing I said when we met His Excellency the President, that it is good that you can see that some business owners are now going into agriculture, primary agriculture. The reason being that we cannot actually be able to support our imports. In fact, most of the indigenous businesses, about 80 to 90% of our raw materials are all import-based. So now, when we saw the depreciation of the cedi so seriously from July till end of November, from 8 to 16, a lot of them decided not to import. So a lot of them have started going at least to the field, to agriculture, to produce their raw materials. And that is a very good step. How is government supporting, these businesses that are going into commercial agriculture? Secondly, what are we demanding? What is our roadmap to ensure that whatever government started doing beginning of December, that we saw the strengthening of our local currency? We are holding government to account to continue and do better. And these are the challenges. We leave almost everything to government and those in power. Meanwhile, these were people that we were mates with when we were in school, or we've worked before with, or we are in churches with. But once they get to power, we leave them. But I think when we do that, then we'll just come back to square one. Thank you very much.
So on the question of inflation again.
Yeah.
In 2023, the expectation...
Are you asking me a question? Or?
You may choose to come back. You may choose to come back, or somebody else can take it. But I'm just setting the premise again. On the question of inflation, in 2023, I think the assumption is that we're going to have inflation remaining a major problem. Simple economics, more money chasing goods. And I think all those who said we have a lot of inflation will agree that mainly it's because of the escalating prices of goods and services, for which we need more money to procure these. There are entities of businesses in this room, I'm sure, who are in the business of selling goods. And the Ghanaian culture of going up and never coming down. And I think that has been one of the major frustrations of government. That, okay, things went up, as a trigger or response to some other factors. But then those factors have corrected. But somehow there is no price correction. The price stays up. How have businesses been part of this problem? And in 2023, how can especially our businesses in the area of sales also do their best in the fight against the inflation, which would then create a systemic problem? So anybody can take it, but if you want to start, it's up to you briefly.
Okay, maybe briefly, what I would say is that in trying to correct this, of course, you are the academic, you are in academia, and I'm an economist. So I mean, we don't want controlled economy. We don't want where we want to legislate prices. Okay, but at least what we know is that when there's competition and then better competition, prices will be forced down. At the moment, what we are seeing is that once you allow these situations to go up that way, it is difficult for them to come down, unless, of course, we increase local production. And there are so many things that we can do here that, to be honest, sometimes we don't know what is wrong with us when we are importing all these things. So the question is, probably what I'm just going to profess as a solution is that we should try and support and increase local production in so many areas. Once we do that, at the moment as we speak, I'm told that local production of rice, we are doing about 400,000 metric tons annually. We need about 1.2 million tons annually. So the gap will still have to be brought from within. Now, if those who are into rice production can be supported a little bit, because just about 3-4 years ago, we were doing only about 50,000 metric tons. Now we've moved up that much. So if actually we can be supported in the next 3 years, probably we can close the gap. So local production and increasing, supporting local manufacturing will be the only way to force prices down. But immediately, probably there should be some sort of regulation to ensure that. The question is that not too long ago, I mean, we had diesel, a liter of diesel, about 24 Ghana cedis per liter. It's now come down to maybe close to 15 liters. How did it happen? So that we can look generally also into other commodities or maybe other prices.
Excellent. Is it time for, and I know the private sector would not be happy with this recommendation. Amma, you have the microphone. I'm not sure you'll be happy with this recommendation, but in the oil industry or in the oil business, GOIL is a good index for government to sometimes moderate prices so that if others will not come down, but GOIL comes down, GOIL forces the market to respond because consumers invariably will go to GOIL. Does that theory compel a reevaluation of government's role in business? Because government has been forced out of business. The old argument is that government is to create the environment, government doesn't do business, stay out of business. But it appears that this paradigm has been working. Somehow the GOIL model has been working. Have we gotten to the point where you think that for strategic areas, government must have one player there, and that one player should then be used more or less blackmail or stampede businesses into doing the right thing, especially because the inflation thing was major. And you see in the area of oil, we can see that oil alone appears to have responded. They've all come down. All the others are still up.
So any free market economics, whether it's the private sector who participates, who's a player, or it's the government is the player, it's all the question of demand and supply. Everything hovers around that. But firstly, to mention that Ghana has ceased to be a dollarized economy. We used to be dollarized earlier, but for the past few years, we have all adopted Ghana CD as the de facto currency. Because I'm into the business of automation, I understand most of our customers used to put pressure on us. We want multi-currency, we want dollar invoicing, this and that. But for the past few years, everybody says, I just want everything in Ghana CDs. Until the very recent disaster which happened from 6, the rate we went all the way to 15 in a very short period of time. There was no choice for anybody else except to go back and dollarize themselves. That instability still continues. We made a good gain back from all the way from 15, we came down to 8, but then we went down, we went up to 13, 14, then we came to 12, now we are at 11. That instability, that within a short period of time, the fluctuation is so low and high, leaves nobody, no other business for the choice to accept to dollarize. And this is where the private sector, the pricing of the goods becomes very uncertain for them. They don't know what CD rate they should use or how they should project. Should they use 8 where it came back? Should they use 10? Should they use 12? Next month, February, what can be the prediction? because we knew that every year is going to be about 20-25% depreciation, and we all build it in our cost. But right now, no business knows how to calculate it. So the only way they can do is dollarize. So I think first thing we need is that stability which the government needs to bring by hook or crook of whatever they do, and private sector unfortunately cannot play any role in stabilizing this currency. It is government's job. They should put their brains together and see how it needs to be done.
Okay, I saw a hand up before Amar spoke. Oh yes, let's allow him and then I'll come to
Yes, so let me look at the same issues in the healthcare space, pharmaceuticals. Almost
doctor,
about,
right?
yes, almost about 70% of all the pharmaceuticals that we use in this country is imported. 70% of all the medicines that we use is imported. So as soon as the CD falls, then we are just off the hook. Everything else will
And
just
from your
go
experience, can local businesses be empowered or enabled to produce the shortfall which is important?
Exactly.
Can they?
Which is where the issue is.
No, can they?
Yes. Because
what government will not want is a gap.
If you
stop imports,
look
but
at
then
healthcare, yes. I mean, all the health issues that we face, malaria, diabetes, and all the hypertensions that we see, a lot of the medicines that we use in Ghana, we have got pharmaceutical firms who have got these products, except that we have a penchant to love things that are foreign. And so even though we have got all of these medicines here, it is in our mindset that if it's imported, it is good. And so we don't want to buy and use these medicines here, so we import, and that accounts for 70%. And so if you ask me, maybe if we can have some limits on how many of these medicines you are able to import, and let us encourage these
and the local ones are
to
as
fill in
potent
there.
as a
They should
doctor.
be able to
The
help
local
us
ones are
in
as
that space.
potent, as good as the foreign ones. As a doctor.
Healthcare is local. If we start to adapt and use these things, that would encourage them. We can have the scientists to actually do all the other things that they need, so that we'll be able to improve on the quality. If we don't start it, there's no way anyone will be able to.
It's all
improve on that
marketing. A
space.
few people may have lost their girlfriends when they gave them local chocolate on Valentine's Day. There were stories of the woman exclaiming, "Did you bring me golden tree?" You know, it's a marketing thing. You made a point, but the point is also about what price or premium we place on the local goods. Let's be honest. When we were growing up, we knew that our mothers and fathers, talking about marriages, we were speaking of Holland wax. I remember there was so much pride with which they would speak of the Holland wax and the Holland part. And I can imagine those who were bold enough to go with some local cloth to certain homes and dared ask of the hand of marriage for a woman. There's a certain mindset. And I'm not sure, and someone spoke of the brand. The brand, what brand do we, the Ghana thing, what brand do we have on it? I saw a hand up.
Yes, I still come back with the earlier observation that I did. It's a policy failure. My senior brother did mention that the dollar we can produce, blah, blah, blah. I might be honest with you. Let me give back another history about UAE. At least I do a lot of business there. UAE doesn't produce, they import. When you go to MDDCC, about 25,000 companies, they are all foreigners, importing. But why are they importing? Because they are finding out that their policies of government is good. So we import and export. The same as Singapore. They don't produce. They import their foodstuff and they export. So at the end of the day, dollar comes, dollar goes out. But here, where? We don't produce, always to consume. So there's always pressure on the dollar. But whereby the policy of government reflects to the local people, let's say the business community, definitely will respond. Like I said, if your sales is not responding, it means that your marketing have a problem. So we need to sit down as a country, as a private sector. Let the private sector engage the private sector. Sometimes here we know the bureaucracy here, but the private sector have to take initiative. One way or the other, government will definitely come in. But if we are not allowing ourselves to engage, I'm doing my business, like my brother said, he's into haulage. When I have some business from the port, do I give it to a foreign company? No, I have to give it to a local company. So at the end of the day, we start engaging ourselves. We rather also push one another. But always saying that, oh, the local have a problem, the foreign doesn't have a problem. The problem is the local businessmen, because we always complain. Singapore doesn't produce, UAE doesn't produce. Look at the inflation. Look at the dollar to dirham rate. Since I went to Dubai, 1998, the dirham is 3.5. Now it's 3.6. How many years? If I cast my mind back, 1999, I was importing King's oil from Singapore. The dollar rate and the cedi charged, escalated. Then what I have to do? I lost a lot of money. Now I have to make sure that I do business in dollars. So you come for the King's oil, I'll price in dollars. Because at the end of the day, you cannot plan. If you plan today, the next moment, the dollar will just expose you. So it's a bottom line is, let us sit now. Let's diagnose their problem. What is their problem? What is the challenges? The bottom line is the private sector have to start engaging. Otherwise, all this complaint, we will start complaining, nothing will happen.
Thank you. Before we go for the next submission, once again, I would want to come to this from my end of the value chain. The marketing, branding, packaging has been spoken about very heavily here. And I want to refer to something I used to, listen to, or that used to hit me a lot when I was growing up, consuming a lot of, content from CNN. And there was an ad for Malaysia that used to say, Malaysia, truly Asia. This was in the early to mid 90s. Question we're asking ourselves is, we have a ministry for, tourism, arts, creative arts and culture. We have set up a Brand Ghana office before. What is the mantra? What is the tagline? When you refer to Ghana, what is it that immediately hits you? Now, you go to South Africa. South Africa always is a very good example because, because of its advancement in terms of its economy and, in terms of industry and all of that. And there is a deliberate effort in South Africa. I remember that my last two visits, just when I was trying to board my flight, somebody from SA Tourism came over, and I realized that they were uniformed. They had their IDs and all of that. They came, did an electronic questionnaire over 5 minutes, and gave a present. Okay? So clearly, there is a deliberate effort on the part of SA Tourism to know how the experience of South Africa is like for every visitor, irrespective of the mode or the reason for your travel. So the question I'm asking myself now is, as a collective, what is the focus? For instance, you see a product and you see truly South African, Malaysia, truly Asia. Do we have proudly Ghanaian as our mantra? And if we have, let's say, the FDA, the Ghana Standards Authority, run along with that, what will be the standards by which what we produce here will be measured, so that then we can have a certain minimum when it comes to how we package our products? I'm glad that Professor Abuchi spoke about the potency of the drugs that we produce, because look, I want to speak to this from my end as a consumer, and I'm sure most of you have been to pharmacies and you've been told that, oh, this is the locally produced one. Estelle, I'm right? Yeah. This is the locally produced one, this is the foreign one. And then at that point you're confused, because when you're not well, it's just a simple matter of your mind is just, let me do whatever I have to do to get well. And my question always is, listen, which one will be most effective, or which one is more potent? And I do not think that as a nation, especially in the health sector or in the pharmaceutical industry, we should be playing around that kind of space, especially with the kind of growth we want to see when it comes to local manufacturing industry. So from my end, like I said, I'm very big on packaging. I'm very big on, aesthetics and all of that. And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's close to nothing. I'll do a quick example before we go. One very quick example. Because of my work as a professional master of ceremony, I've come across loads and loads of product launches over my career, And I remember that recently there was the launch of a product called Afro, APHRO. Now, it's a collaboration between a Ghanaian entrepreneur and one of the two brothers of P Square in Nigeria, the musical artists. Okay? Now, what is Afro? Afro is akpeteshi. It's as simple as that. Afro is the akpeteshi that our uncles and our aunties and our grandparents used to cart from the villages in big drums and come here, pour into bottles, and sell in what we refer to informally as the blue kiosks. Now, someone with the premium mind and with the mind of industrialization and selling Ghana properly and packaging a product properly, giving it a certain level of premium effect, now sits back, says, no, let's distill this a little better, give it better packaging, and let's sell it. And Afro is one of the biggest testaments that you could ever give for Ghana when it comes to, the beverage industry in Ghana. Would welcome a few more, and then we can wrap up the session. Thank you.
My name is Yao Sompa. I've paid a keen attention to most of the conversations. I've made some notes, particularly to the conversations on economy and culture that hinges those ones. I think that we need to break it down. There is a question of design. So on a broad, big picture, we're talking about big design. And so America in 1971 had a Nixon shock, similar debt issue, but prices in terms of value went up rather than down. Why? Because America now didn't need gold. America could print papers as dollars, and it only consolidated U.S. hegemony, and we're all living off of it. Now, why is Ghana going through a similar situation and value is down? The first thing I would say is that there are always big designs. The structure we live in has a global dimension to it. There's a global architecture. Whether you like it or not, the Bretton Woods and the Washington Consensus have a means to the way the world works. And so the first thing I would say is there are questions of design we need to pay attention to as we solve the problems. But there are also functional and practical implementation. So questions of industrialization, production on yourself, consuming what you produce and things like that. But the third one is how we make decisions, quality of decisions, but more so the value-based, the values that direct decisions. We're speaking about the market, demand and supply. We all go back to Adam Smith and all he says. But we forget that he had a theory of moral sentiment, which was a foundational theory for his invincible hand, which basically says that the values by which society guides itself becomes the moral authority for which markets work. And so most of the things, and that's why I go to the sacrifice and the ideas, it's the values that drives us. What are the values that anchors all of us? We've all become short-sighted, but more importantly, the hunger over years, and permit me, I know this is a big platform, but a lot of the fact that we were split apart, talk of colonialization and all the incidents of it, has made us think a certain way that collaboration is almost alien to us. We've built a high distrust environment where we can't trust each other. We are better off trusting people who look different than us than collaborating and working with each other. I'm seeing very interesting faces. Now, the fact that we can't work and collaborate together means that our decisions are to an end, sometimes to our own detriment. We can't act in our own best interest, which means that it becomes a game and we're pawns in that big game where we are only mailed for the advantage of others. And so once we understand that there's a bigger game, there's a global dynamic, yes, there are functional, practical things we can do that can lessen our woes. If you look at the trend of our currency since 1998, it's exponential. We're depreciating at an exponential rate. I think somebody mentioned 2025. It is not an arbitrary number. It is actually a fact that you can at best slow the decay, but we're decaying. So in order to change that, we need a whole design change. We need practical values that guide us towards it. But we also need to understand that price takers and market makers exist. And so we need to align in a way that guides us to value ourselves and the perception that comes from it. So these are comments I just wanted to make.
Thank you. We would like to close not long from now. I'm curious about what you think of the investment climate for 2023 in light of the debt exchange program in particular. How can we drive up confidence in the investment climate in Ghana, the investment environment in Ghana? And also whether you think that we've gotten to that point where we should start insuring our investments. I've been thinking about this quietly, whether it would have been a good idea to insure your investments, and whether that would be a good business opportunity for insurers, or whether that could potentially be dangerous if they underwrite some of these things. But if, for example, you are insuring investment, what it means is that the potential risks like these could have been indemnified, or you would have been protected. Again, I'm thinking as a layman in this respect, but I'm not sure if the investors here and the insurers here see a business opportunity in that space. Please make your comments. I think we are very interested in your comments, but make it short so that others too can participate, so we can close very quickly.
Because I'm a journalist, mine is a question. Nimama is my name. I am a lead producer with Class FM. We've had conversations about the city, and the Economist Intelligence Unit has projected a 22 depreciation rate of the cedi against the dollar in 2023. I'm asking McDan this and anyone here, what can we do, or what would this group do to stop the appreciation of the dollar from here? Can this group boast, or can this group promise that when we leave here, we are going to ensure that we are going to do A, B, and C in order to help the city appreciate, so that we, the journalists, we can monitor, and when we return here next year, we will have questions for you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nima. The question I want to ask all of us is, are we fighting enough? We business owners and entrepreneurs, are we fighting enough? Do we have that zeal to fight to get what we want? I believe Ghana is for all of us. The Nigerians fought. Now their local content is very, very strong. Are we so weak that we always sit and speak English? Somebody want to say something, one is afraid to be tagged. Once you are saying anything you say in Ghana, you'll be somebody will say will have something to say about you anyway. That one I must tell you. You will know. I always say that you will have whatever you want to do. 99% of the people will doubt you. It's either you are making the biggest mistake of your life, or you are making history or a big change. So this forum is for us to decide. I believe, Mr. Bochi, we should have this first week every year. The next year will come is supposed to be bigger than this and solution-oriented forums. Right now, after it's about landing here, I moved to after with ideas. And after gave me the nod that, look, be the one to move all the cargo in the Africa, the whole Africa region. It's too big for me. I need partners. I need players in Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa. I just procured 2 cargo planes and 1 vessel for this. I want to start the Black Star Line. Is the politician ready to support me to start the Black Star Line? That at the back of after, Ghana will be the first African country to have a shipping line once again, because the market is there. Government is not looking at me. Nobody have invited me for a talk. I sent a proposal, it's lying there. I am filling it. So what do we do? The Nigerians supported their own. What are we doing? And you see, when you come to Ghana, businessmen are so, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say something to, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I just say, I just don't want to say the wrong thing. But Ghana is for all of us. Let me say it like that. We have to be seen fighting. We have to take the fight to government. We have to take the fight to the politicians. Because we can no longer sit back 2023 for us, for them to be taking decisions for us. Everything is going wrong for us. So if you ask me, the outcome of this meeting, somebody is gathering all the notes, what everybody have said from this meeting. I'm adding my closing remarks anyway, so that we jump onto cocktail. So Nimama, thank you. How do we? There are few things disturbing us in this country. If you check what is going on, the government is so ready to impose taxes. We have become a consuming nation. We have big weights in this country, but how have we packaged ourselves? It's also about packaging. We as businesses, have we packaged ourselves well? How do we want government to respect us? So out of this forum, what are we taking out of this forum? We are big businesses in Ghana, but packaging is so wrong. And we are so afraid to take bold steps. We are so afraid that whatever is being dished on us, we accept it. We should get somewhere to say no. We should get somewhere to fight. We should get somewhere to accept our wrong and fight on to say no. We as a business community, we are not taking this. And what I have observed in recent days is, right now, there's so much detached between businesses and government. And the trade unions, and it's all the shout. Even if you look at those who present themselves, they are not a big weight, so who listen to them? So, as I'm concluding, we have the IPPMCs, we have the Aziz. Zoom Lion just called me. I was so happy when I heard about his rice project. He just said it's running late, it's with his Tyler, it's supposed to be here. And if somebody like Zoom Lion is going to do 2 million metric tons of rice, somebody is doing chicken, 2 million birds every quarter. And we can take this to government. So we have to, right now, I'm taking the bold step to start salt. Within a year, I'm doing 1 million metric tons of salt, no matter how hard it is. And it's going to be the biggest in the African continent. Who do I support to start something? So for me, this forum for me is so important that we have to go the Nigerian way to fight and strengthen our local content. Look, there should be a time when government give contract to a foreign company where one of us can do it, raw rice, and say, no, this is wrong. Everybody is quiet. And if we do that 1, 2, 3, the politician will start listening to us. At time when the tender go out, check those who even, the Ghanaians, we don't even have the courage to say, we want to be part of this tender process. Before you see the contract is in the hands of a foreigner. I asked one minister that you are getting every time foreigner. Have you asked whether Ghanaians can do it? How many people have you invited in the private sector and to give them that, okay, this is on the table. Can anybody raise finance to do this? But before you say, oh, is gone, is gone, is gone. So what do we do? Can't we gather the courage to go the Nigerian way? To strengthen our local content for once? I said I want to start the private jet terminal. Everybody doubted me. What we have sitting there is the best in the world. Go to all the terminal, the private jet terminal in the world. You will never see this. Even the whites, when they pass through my terminal, they say, wow, do we have this here? I took a bold decision to do it for Ghana, not for myself. I saw it in one Nigerian paper, the picture of my terminal in a Nigerian newspaper, and they have rated Ghana aviation above Nigerian aviation because of the private terminal. So what do we do? I saw so many IT consultancy going to foreigners. Meanwhile, we have a guru of IT here. If we see something like that, can't we stand up and fight? Maybe this should be the beginning to take the fight to government. Not political, not we don't play politics. We want the money to stay here. We want the business. We want to grow. We want to expand. I was on Joy FM yesterday. I said, no, in all the aspects in this company, in this country, is owned by foreigners. Right now, Mr. Amai is sitting here. He's not a foreigner. He has a Ghanaian passport. So I don't see him as a foreigner. Mr. Kamoni is sitting here. He was born here. A lot of people don't know. At Adabraka. North Ridge. You know? So we have to have that indigenous spirit to fight and let things stay here for us. I won't say much, but this forum is to take the fight to the policy makers. Aziz said one thing, and we all got into trouble. Cocoa. There are many sectors in this country that we have to fight for. Thank you very much.
I think the program, the first phase has been closed. This, as I indicated at the beginning, was not designed to have somebody speak for someone to listen. We are at the beginning of a new year. Businesses are anxious, and I think someone made the point that a simple statement can change the fortunes of things. And in business, you know, perception is everything. Even if the substance is not true, perception changes everything. So we have spoken, and I think that there's a fair amount of frustration, there's a fair amount of uncertainty, there's a fair amount of worry, and then we recount the problems. The conversation continues. And I think one thing that comes out of this, however, is the need to engage, or the need to engage government. It will be important or imperative that organized business, and I know why I'm saying this, nearly everybody here belongs to the CEO network of Ghana. And he said I shouldn't ask him to speak, so you speak. But you know, nearly everybody here belongs to the CEO network of Ghana. The CEO and the CEO group are already organized. That organization, in terms of direction, perhaps we have to start mobilizing for purposes of engagement. I don't think that, you know, this idea of government hasn't come, so you can't go. I think it should be both ways. If government hasn't come, then business has to go. There must be some engagement, so that ultimately when government is helped, business can be helped. I think it's not a case of one entity helping the other. If there's an environment that has been created, if business enables government, business itself is enabled. So I think that we'll just bring the first phase to a close, and then we'll have the cocktail. It is at the cocktail that we can have the one-on-one